In this video, I want to talk about ciders, what they are, how to make them, and why, even as traditionally a beer nerd, I'm actually getting pretty excited about them lately. So I always thought I hated ciders. I had my first ciders back in college, and I tried a few different ones, but it was all the big like macro commercial cideries. So Angry Orchard, Bold Rock, I forget what other brands there were, but none of them were very good, at least not to me. They're all sickly sweet. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you probably know by now, I don't really like super sweet drinks. I can get behind like a bourbon with some, barrel spice with the sweetness, or like a Speyside scotch. But for fermented brews like mead, wine, cider, beer, I want it dry and acidic and tannic and just not sweet at all. And I always thought, because of those first ciders that I had, that's just what cider was. It was just ridiculously sweet. And back then I had no concept of what back sweetening was, or that it was even a thing. See, I made exclusively beers up to that point, and with beer, back sweetening isn't a thing. You just design the recipe and the process to, leave a whole bunch of unfermentable sugar if you want it sweeter. And so it really wasn't until like 6 or 7 years ago when I started making like mead and wine that I even discovered what back sweetening was. And it didn't even click then that maybe that's why I didn't like ciders, and maybe a dry cider could be good. It wasn't actually until earlier this year that I even started thinking about it again. What actually happened is YouTube started suggesting some old videos from some of my favorite brew tubers like Apartment Brewer, Dr. Hans, Clawhammer Supply, and several others. They all did videos on ciders. And that got me thinking. I thought maybe, just maybe, those awful, terrible, Macrociders that I'd had years ago are all just back sweet. I looked it up, and that's exactly what it is. All of them are back sweetened to a ridiculous degree. And so that got me thinking, maybe there's a dry cider out there that actually tastes good. And so I went out and I tried to find a dry cider, and there's really none out there. Despite a whole bunch of new local cideries popping up in my area, there's still nothing at the grocery store except for, the big, giant macro commercial brands. And after a lot of searching, I was finally able to find just one store that had a dry cider. And I'm guessing this is still kind of a big brand. They're from New York, and they seem to market themselves as explicitly being dry cider makers. And so I bought all 3 of the offerings that this store had for this brand. Now, full disclaimer, I have already tried these, so you're not really getting like a first reaction to them. But I am going to go through them, and I'm going to tell you what I found. First up is the one just labeled dry cider. This is their flagship brew, and it's really what I was looking for, just a plain dry cider. It doesn't say anywhere on it what it's made from or what goes into it, other than it's, New York apples, I assume just dessert apples, and that it's very, very dry. And I get what they were going for here. This one actually has the most potential of all 3. It's definitely dry, it has that apple character, but it's buried deep down in there. It's just so hard to find anything to enjoy behind just the wall of fart flavor. Like, it's just all farts and a little cider underneath. And I know where this problem comes from. This is a process issue. It's not an inherent issue with cider or with their recipe. Sulfur is an off flavor that happens naturally during fermentation, and it's fairly common in like ciders and lagers, and it's fairly easy to fix. All they really needed to do was just let it age a little longer. Now, maybe I just had a bad batch, but I'm not really willing to go spend more money on this to find out. Next, let's take a look at the blackberry cider. Now, this one's better, but it's still not really my jam. I do like blackberries a lot, and it's pretty tart, which is good, but it's sweeter than I'd like. It's not sickeningly sweet like Angry Orchard, for example, and it's actually kind of tolerable, but still more than I'd prefer. To be fair, though, it doesn't say anywhere on the packaging that, it's a dry cider, so it's not like they're lying to me. Lastly is the pear cider. I think this one's both apples and pears. This one's actually the best of all 3. It's dry, it's crisp, it's refreshing. I could actually see myself drinking a bunch of these on like a hot summer day. I actually do kind of like this one. My only real gripe is that the flavor is just barely there. Like, I wish it just had more flavor. I doubt I'd ever buy this one again, but I guess if there was nothing else at the store, I would be okay with it. Well, that was disappointing. But I don't think that's because ciders themselves are disappointing. I think I just have a hard time finding stuff I like that I can actually find and buy. Thankfully though, I can just make it. And that's kind of become the story of my homebrewing life these days. I keep brewing because I can't find what I want in the store. And so here's the two things I have on tap right now. These are both hop ciders. In fact, that's what I've mostly been making cider-wise lately. I really recommend, even if you're a beer nerd like me and you don't think you like cider, try making it hopped like this. You may not ever like it as much as beer, but the hops sort of help to bridge that gap and help you acclimate to the cider by, providing some familiarity. Now these are kind of similar to each other. They both use Publix brand apple juice, but they use two different strains of Kvike yeast and two different hop profiles. Now this isn't a recipe video, so I'm not really going to go in depth on how to make either of these, although I might have a recipe video on this one in the near future once I get the recipe dialed in. I do have the hop profiles shown on screen for you though, if you want to try and reverse engineer them. Now this one actually started its life in the previous video as the grocery store fruit juice hooch. Remember, I was going to treat this like a cider. I went ahead and kegged it like I said I was going to, but on a whim, I tossed some hops in first. For this one, I tried to mimic sort of an IPA style, and I used American citrusy hops. And if you remember, it was made with Voss Kvike, which really amps up that hop flavor and gives it sort of an ale character. Unfortunately though, I find that the fruitiness and the citrusiness of the American hops sort of blend with the apple and just make it taste more appley, which isn't really a bad thing, it just doesn't taste like an IPA. This one though turned out to be exactly what I was hoping for. Or almost, I guess. It's pretty good, but I'm still working on the recipe. This one's meant to be like a Pils cider with Lutra Kvike to make it more lagery and German noble hops. And I think the German noble hops really shine in this. I think the spiciness really plays off of the apple and contrasts and adds to it, whereas the American hops just kind of meld into it. Plus, surprisingly, this one turned out super lagery. I mean, it's dry and refreshing, and it's got that neutral flavor like you get from Lutra, but it's also crisp. It's got that I've really never been able to get from a beer without real lager yeast. And I think it's because of the tartness of the apple, but that's exciting, and I want to explore that more. Now, I think the lowest hanging fruit for improving both of these recipes is adding some hop bitterness. So I'm going to work on that and I'm going to get back to you. Okay, so just to get this out of the way, let's sort of define what cider is. The official or legal or whatever you want to call it definition basically just says it's any fermented beverage that's made from apples. But to me, that's a little too broad and not very descriptive, because when I think of cider, I think of more than just apples. I think fizzy and also sort of beer level of alcohol content. So if it's high ABV, it's apple wine. And if it's high ABV and fizzy, it's sparkling apple wine. And if it's low ABV and not fizzy, I don't think I've ever encountered that. So let me know in the comments what you think we should call that. Coming from a beer brewing background, cider is surprisingly easy to make. And yet, I wouldn't suggest it as a beginner-friendly thing. 90% of the process is just what we did in that previous video where I showed you how to make, easy grocery store fruit juice hooch. You can go back and watch that video for a full step-by-step of the process, but the gist of it is you take a jug of apple juice, you dump some dry yeast in it, and you let it ferment. But because you carbonate it, that makes it more complicated. It puts it way up the difficulty scale compared to basically anything not fizzy, like mead or wine. Carbonation is pretty difficult. You can do it without extra equipment and with no added cost, but it takes meticulous, precise measurement of the sugar into each individual bottle, or else you get bottle bombs. If you're committed to the hobby and you're at all thinking about getting a kegging setup, I would absolutely recommend it. It can get pricey and it takes up space, but it massively simplifies the process. At one point, I actually stopped making beer, or I guess really anything fizzy for a while, until I got a kegging setup, just because I hate bottle carbing. Now, that's not to say you should be scared of it or avoid it. People do it all the time. I did it for a very long time with minimal issue. I'm just saying you got to know what you're doing. And so if you're comfortable with carbonating, whether you're bottle carbing or kegging, the rest of cider making is a breeze, at least until you get into like different apple varieties and stuff. And that's one thing that's real exciting about cider is just how easy it is, especially when compared to, something like beer. It is so nice to be able to make something that's fizzy and refreshing and, kind of beer adjacent in like 15 minutes instead of carving out an entire brew day. But that's not all that's exciting about cider right now. Doing the Most actually put out a video on cider and what's going on in the cider industry recently. And he has a lot more insight into all of that than I do, so I won't reiterate that here, but some of the stuff he was talking about was pretty fascinating. For one thing, the way he talked about like the commercial, industrial, like craft level of cider making, and all the new science and knowledge and information coming out and being shared and proliferated, that sounds a lot like beer about 15 years ago. And I've definitely noticed a lot of cideries popping up in my area, even as some of the breweries are shutting down. And just like 15 or 20 years ago when the, sort of craft beer renaissance was just starting up and breweries were popping up, but you still couldn't find craft beer on the shelves. Sounds a lot like cider right now. And I'm not saying there's going to be like a craft cider renaissance like there was a beer renaissance, but that could be kind of cool. And the cool thing about that for us homebrewers is that all that information and innovation, it trickles down. It did, 15 or 20 years ago with beer. That's how we ended up with all these new processes and knowledge about like pressure fermenting, all-in-one brewing systems, water chemistry, and et cetera, et cetera. And in that Doing the Most video, he said that's exactly what he saw happening at that cider conference. And I'm so excited to potentially relive all of the homebrewing hype that I did back in the day with beer, with cider. And if you haven't seen that Doing the Most video, go watch it because it's pretty interesting. Now, there is one problem with cider making at the homebrewing level, and it's the same problem we have with wine. See, with beer, and to a lesser extent mead, you basically have any ingredient you could ever want right at your fingertips to make any style or recipe. You can go out, you can get any kind of malt, any kind of hop, any kind of yeast, and make whatever you want with it. The only limit to what you can make is, your skill and your process. And even if you don't have a local homebrew store, you can still just hop onto morebeer.com and get it shipped right to your door. And in my experience with them, it always ships very fast. And if you spend $59 or more, you get free shipping. Oh, and by the way, next time you order from them, and if you're making beer, I know you will, just use a QR code on screen or the link in the description below. It costs nothing to you, it just helps out the channel. And it's the same with me, just I guess to a lesser extent, like I said. There's sites out there where you can order basically any varietal of honey that you want. Flying Bee Ranch has been my go-to lately. They have a ton of different kind of honeys. And I don't have an affiliate link for them, I just like their products. But there are other sites out there too. But the point I'm getting at is that with cider and wine, you really only have what fruit you can get from the store. And there's options, but it's basically all table fruit. It's like, dessert apples and Concord grapes. Most grocery store fruit just doesn't produce cider or wine with any like acid or tannin or really any complexity of any kind. With wine, basically anything you make from something you get at the store just isn't going to be as complex and nuanced and interesting as even the cheapest, Cabernets or Malbecs or whatever. And from what I understand, same goes with cider. You can't get cider apples unless you know somebody with an orchard. And the result is that at the homebrew level, you're kind of capped with how good of a product you can make. And for now, that's fine. The world of cider is brand new to me right now. So there's a lot of new and interesting things I can experience, even with just grocery store fruit. And maybe down the line, we'll have some more options. There's actually one thing I've seen out there that could be interesting. So I'm going to try that out, see how it works, and I'll get back to you on that. Plus, I have all the hop ciders I'm still working on. And I'm excited to have this channel now where I can share the adventure and the progress and all the things I learned with y'all out there on YouTube. So I hope you'll join me and, keep an eye out for all that. And of course, I'm going to keep making beer and mead and wine and, all that stuff too. This video felt like a bit of a weird one for me with all the rambling about how I feel about cider and all that. If you like this kind of thing, like the video, subscribe, leave a comment so you can let me know, and maybe I'll do more of it. But of course, I'm going to keep doing the other stuff too. In fact, I much prefer to do more informational or instructional kind of content, or like give you something actionable so, I can help people learn and improve in the craft along with me. But maybe I'll do this again. Either way, I'll see you in the next one.